Luminaries, I have a very special episode with you. Today, I'm joined with Klarrisa Frank, and I'm just so drawn to her work. She is a mixed Asian and she talks about leadership and identity. And, I am a mixed Asian as well, and always like searching for that idea of like, who am I and how am I supposed to show up? So I hope this episode serves. Welcome to the Savvy Luminary podcast, Astrology for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, creator of the Astrobrand Method, business astrologer, brand designer, author, and Aquarius boss woman. I help visionary spiritual entrepreneurs and impact makers like you illuminate and amplify your unique star powers so you can be the luminary you were born to be. Luminaries, I am so excited to bring on Klarrisa Frank. We've been working on collaborating for quite a while right now. She's a Scorpio sun, Aquarius moon, and rising leader, originally from California and now making a beautiful living in Amsterdam. Welcome, Klarrisa.
Hello, Leslie. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we finally made this happen.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it is Aquarius season, and you have so much Aquarius in you with your Aquarius rising and your moon.
Yes, and I didn't know that much about it until talking with you more and more and learning about it and how it works with my business. And I'm still learning more and more about it.
It's a lifelong process. I mean, honestly, even like knowing as much as I know about my own astrology, I'm always like stepping more into the highest potentials all the time. So I really wanted to bring you on, especially during this Aquarius season with your Aquarius rising and your Aquarius moon, because to me, like when I'm thinking about like our businesses, like we both have like this kind of shared mission in terms of like, how do we show up as leaders and how do we find our own sense of belonging? I find that this has like really impacted my work as an Aquarius, as somebody with mixed identity. And obviously it's done that for you. Could you share a little bit about your work and your journey?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, well, before I knew about Aquarius, what I really knew was about my mixed identity and feeling like misunderstood or not seen who I want to be seen as, or, what I felt like a leader should be, because that's what you see a certain leader archetype in the media and the world. And I felt like that's not me. I'm more quiet, I'm more reserved. And so, maybe I can't be a leader because that's not, how leaders show up. That's kind of in my journey, is like figuring out, my identity and actually what does leadership mean to me. And so that's a little bit of the work that I do now, is helping leaders, really step into and find the parts of them that are ready to shine, that are ready to be out there and be recognized, and so that they can be seen as experts in things as well. And because what I've seen in my own work and stuff is like when you're sharing your gifts, sharing your story, people start to see you as that authority, as that expert, and then you get opportunities like this to come and chat on podcasts maybe, or write articles, or I've been asked to speak at conferences and for companies that I had never even heard of, because I was just sharing my story and sharing my expertise of my identity, of who I am, basically.
Yeah, I love that so much, because what I really wanted to, like kind of like an overview of what I'm really hoping that listeners really get into is this idea of identity, this idea of leadership, and this idea of belonging. And so I wanted to explore those kind of three concepts with you, Klarrisa, and to share with the luminaries, because I feel this sense of identity is really hard to get into, especially for people who are of mixed identities or marginalized identities. There's all this kind of societal and systemic impressions that are coming on us. And before I jump into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about Aquarius and why this is so important right now, like to just kind of put the foundational framework. So, the Aquarius archetype that we've talked a lot about in your Astrobrand session, Aquarius is like the innovator. Like we hear it as like that innovator archetype or that rebel archetype. And traditionally it's ruled by Saturn. And And modernly, it's ruled by Uranus. And so when we think about Saturn as the traditional ruler, like Saturn loves to create boundaries, it loves to create foundation, it loves to create systems, it likes to create hierarchy and this idea of authority figures. And so Capricorn and both Aquarius are ruled by Saturn. So the Capricorns are like, okay, let's follow the rules and let's go by the book and like create these like authoritarian systems that, obviously haven't really been working as like the world has become more diverse. And then the Aquarian aspect of that Saturn rulership, it's like, okay, well, now there's this box and there's people in the box and I'm outside that box looking in. Like, how can I get in that box? Do I belong in that box? Like, I want to belong. I want to be part of that group. But then on the other hand, I want to break free from that group because like, I don't fit in. I'm different, but how can I still find this sense of belonging? Right. And that's where if we have a strong Aquarius identity, whether sun, moon, rising, or we have a stellium in Aquarius, for those of us that have that, we're always exploring this place of like, wait, do I fit in? Like, I need to fit in. I need to be part of this society, but like people just don't understand me. I'm just too weird. And I see this Aquarius, especially Aquarius moon, in so many people that have these mixed identities. Like, where the heck do I fit in?
Yeah, I'm smiling because you're describing me to a T. And I think I said that during our session as well. And so, yeah, it's super interesting that you find that, in other mixed charts or charts of other mixed people.
Yeah. So tell me what does it mean? Like, how do you identify as somebody who's mixed? Can you share a little bit of your background?
Yeah. So I've played around with words a lot. So I feel like, especially since high school and starting with like, I'm half Asian and probably still using that through college, half Asian, half Chinese. And then more as an adult, saying like I'm mixed and identifying as mixed Asian, and also pulling in other parts of what that means, not just race and culture, but like also, well, other stories. Like my mom is an immigrant and like how, being the child of an immigrant impacts you as well. And being, looking at other parts of my identity, like my education, like being the first person in my family to go to university and these kinds of things. So I think like now when I view my mixed identity, it is like about race and ethnicity, but it's also about like, actually I like using the term from someone, and I'll have to find their name, but they use the term multi, and I like that even more because it's like multi, because like, yeah, we're a multitude of identities and ways of being in this world. And I think that's where I'm moving more towards. It's like, okay, what does my multi identity look like? And it's Asian. It's now I'm living in the Netherlands in Amsterdam. And so, now it's a little bit of Dutchness that I add to my life. My partner is from Barcelona, so he's Spanish and Catalan. So he's mixed in his own way, I guess. And adding that. So it's like, as an adult, realizing like, okay, yeah, this is how I was made, one parent this, one parent that. But now, my mixedness has, as an adult, it just keeps like adding new layers and seeing them as more beautiful. And I think that's one of maybe the beautiful parts of having growing up mixed, is that like, okay, I know that this like just adding on makes me more complex, and which can be hard.
Yeah.
But like learning, like being like, it also expands me. It also expands me to more opportunities, cultures, people, all those things as well.
Yeah, I love that word multi. I remember in like that's one of the kind of terms that I use a lot too, in terms of like us being like multifaceted, right? There's this, like when we think about like this sense of identity, and like, before, like even on just kind of like surveys, like you need to like pick one identity, like one race. And I'm just like, well, or one gender, even like those things are changing now, right? Like there's like non-binary genders, there's forms where you can select more things on a list of racial identities. But, this sense of like mixed identity really comes back to our very first experiences, like in our families with our primary caretakers. And if we are that kind of idea of mixed blooded, right? If we are of multiple racial identities, sometimes our families don't even know how to support somebody, their own children that have mixed identities. I've heard of just so many stories, and even just me personally, like I'm half Filipino and half Jewish, and I was not Filipino enough for some of my family, and I was definitely not white enough for some of my family. So like not like like not identifying, being really disconnected from both until just much later in years, and how that kind of resolution, that inner, those basic needs as a child of not being accepted in either or, how that really impacts and creates these patterns and these frameworks that we still are trying to resolve in later life. And so it comes back to finding that sense of belonging. But as we become grown-ups, even if we didn't get that sense of belonging from our families, how do we now create our own sense of belonging? I think is like one of like the ultimate themes that I see you doing in your work, even if you maybe haven't put those words, exact words into it.
No, exactly. I think, I've said this to you before, but something I tell my clients all the time is like, belonging starts with you. And I think that's true of belonging. It's true of leadership as well, as like when we feel that belonging is, essentially connection. When you feel that connection to all the parts of you and all, the broken and the whole and the, the kind of slightly shattered, whatever parts of us, when you start to feel like connected and compassionate and loving towards those parts, I feel like that's when you feel belonging to yourself. So that's why I say it starts with you, but also it feels like, oh, I feel more like confident, and there has to be a better word, but more assured, maybe, to like reach out to someone else or others or communities.
Yeah, like more centered and grounded or whole in how you want to show up versus allowing other people to define how they see you. And right, do you feel that kind of like that belonging starts with you? It's like you decide how you want to show up.
Exactly, because I think what has sent me into hiding in the past is because I just got overwhelmed that people like were always defining me for me. They're always, just even in passing, like in the shops here, somebody asking where I'm from and me saying I'm American, but then they don't believe me because I don't look like the typical American that they have seen in movies or TV shows or whatever,
where are you really from?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I thought I was going to get away from that question moving abroad, but here we are. No, but I think, so going back to, that sent me like into hiding for a while, because like, okay, who am I actually? Because like people tell me that I look too Asian, too white, too this, too American, too not American enough. I really needed to find like and connect to like, who is Klarrisa? How does she actually want to show up in the world? And that's what I love doing with clients now too, is like, who actually are you? What's the piece of you that wants to shine through right now? And how do we get there?
How do we get there? I know, like, even, if you're listening, and even if you're not of mixed identity, you've probably had those kinds of questions posed on you. And when you're allowing other people to define your identity, that it never goes to that wrong place. And also on the other hand, it's like, if we're not willing to look at all of those, how you lovingly put it, Klarrisa, like all of those like unwhole or even shattered parts of yourself, then we're missing this whole piece of ourselves if we're not really willing to look at those kind of like broken pieces and how they are part of our identity, which then shows us how we're going to be visible. That shows us how we're going to find our own expertise and claim that expertise, which then leads us to our authentic leadership. And so all of these things, that pathway from like, how do we decide how we want to identify all of those unique differences, all of the perceived positives and the perceived negatives that like make our whole identity, and how that leads into our natural expertise and our natural leadership. I see it as this like clear pathway. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I like how you said, even for those of you that are listening that are not mixed, I think like just going to toot our own horns for a moment. I think as mixed people, working as coaches and you and your unique work and mine and my own is like, we've grown up being able to see like all different kinds of perspectives and all different kinds of ways of being. And so like being able to, if you can't see that for yourself, like being able to like have somebody that can see all those things for you is like super helpful, and to help you, just unearth some of those things that maybe you don't see in yourself quite yet.
But now you've also defined these other ways that even if you're not like mixed racial identity, how we can have these kinds of multifaceted leadership, or this feeling of an outsider looking in, right? Like you've defined, can you tell us how you've defined that in your work now, expanding past the multi-Asian racial identity?
Yeah, exactly. So when I first met you, I was working primarily with mixed race Asian women. Mixed race women, and just essentially mostly Asian women found me, which is fine. And now I've expanded. I'm starting to use multicultural, the word multicultural, to define who I work with, because I have a lot of clients here in Amsterdam who are immigrants and expats who, come from one maybe like country over, like Germany, maybe. And so they seem very similar to here, but they're still like struggling with how to, stand in their own leadership, to find belonging here in the Netherlands without, sacrificing their culture or their values or who they are, but like still trying to fit in and trying to make a life here. Right. And so that's something I help people with. And then I also have a few handful of clients over the past year that have wanted to transition industries or, jobs. And I feel like those are different cultures. When you move from nonprofits to corporate or vice versa, or, you move from corporate into starting your own business, those are also like ways of crossing cultural lines. Those are all different cultures. Right. And like learning how like you can still bring the value from your old, whatever job, position, whatever it might be, into this new culture, and those values that you valued from maybe like working in a corporation or a nonprofit, and like how that might help or enhance your experiences in the new place.
I just love this idea of, it's like cross-cultural. Like, how do we create this like cross-cultural belonging? Because what I keep on hearing, especially with the Aquarius archetype, and you have Mars and your moon hanging right out at your ascendant, and it's not about fitting in. It's about still like feeling this sense of belonging while you are like I don't have the words yet, but it's, how would you say it? It's like, you're creating this sense of belonging, not by fitting in, but by being different and adding your unique perspective.
Yeah, it's almost like attraction, but like, like people are attracted to you because of like your shine, your uniqueness, and like what you have to offer. Yeah, it's staying true to who you are, because it's not, now I know like a lot of us when we were kids or teenagers or even as adults, we've had to, not forget part of ourselves, but lose part of ourselves, hide parts of ourselves. That's the word I'm looking for. Hide parts of ourselves to fit in or to be accepted or whatever. And I know I just see a new world where we can just be who we are, like our silly, fun, weird selves, whatever that might be, and still find acceptance, because there has to be people out there that will love you as you are and see you as a leader for who you are. That's also part of my vision.
Yeah. And I think that's that Aquarius archetype, right? With that Aquarius archetype, like how you said, it's like you first have to create your own sense of belonging. You first have to find that sense of self-love and self-admiration, and that you have to fit into yourself, not trying to conform to somebody else, right? Like you're still part of the community. And so you had an amazing question. Like we kind of posed some questions, and I know it was a big question. So sometimes it's hard to find that big question. But we posed a question on Instagram about, how, like, what do you want to know about multicultural leadership? And you had a great question that came through, right?
Yeah. And just looking down here, it said, someone asked how to embrace, both of your identities or your multitude of identities while also feeling disconnected from both. And I was actually going to ask you that, because when you were sharing your story, I'm curious, how you dealt with it, but I can also share some of my perspectives as well. But
Yeah. So I think we both decided that we don't exactly have an answer.
No.
But we have some like ideas for like reflections, right? And I know with like my multicultural identity, and there's just like so many identities, right? It's not just like a racial identity. We have like body identities, like gendered identities, age identities. There's just like a multitude of things. But if we're focusing on just kind of our racial or our cultural backgrounds, it's like, how do you embrace both identities when you feel disconnected? Well, me personally, like this has been a terribly long journey because, initially I mentioned that I am half Filipino and half Jewish, and I was raised in Hawaii. And both like being Filipino and both being Jewish were things that up until very recently, like I'm talking like 2020, like I'm talking like really, really, really recently until I had the language for it, I was actually really ashamed of being both. In Hawaii, like Filipinos, like there's like this massive class system in Hawaii, just based on like all of the plantations, which were based on colonialism. And, like the product of colonialism is to divide and conquer. And so because there were more Asians and there were of, the managers and the oppressors, they categorized the different Asians and paid them different wages so that they could separate them and that they wouldn't come together. And so the Filipinos were like on the lowest of that wage scale. And so it still is impacted in some of the culture in Hawaii today, where Filipinos are not necessarily regarded as like a higher class citizen. And I really felt that my grandmother wouldn't teach me how to speak Filipino because she didn't want me to have an accent. So I don't know my language. And then on the other end of like the Judaism, I mean, just like I was really afraid to tell people that my mother was Jewish just because of all of the anti-Semitism that there still is.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So only in the last couple of years did I learn these ideas. There is a term called colonial mentality, where the definition of colonial mentality is that you are part of an oppressed society, and then you begin to think that culture is not valuable because you take on the thoughts, the mentality of the colonial settlers. And so that was something that I really had to get in touch with. And then my friend Asha Frost, who is an Indigenous medicine woman, and she teaches people how to get in touch with their ancestral roots, did I really start to see the richness and like learn about the richness of the Filipino culture, like pre-colonization. And then this idea with coming back to my Jewish roots and saying like, I can't hide anymore. I can't hide who I am. Like I can't hide it from myself and I can't hide it from others. And so how do I become proud and brave to talk about this heredity? And when I looked about my Jewish background, I found that there's like this long lineage of doing new moon ceremonies. And I was like, wait, this was already in me. And so there's a sense of like curiosity and bravery and seeing and really getting curious with like, where did these mental constructs come from? Because I suspect for that person that answered when they feel disconnected, it's like, why did they feel disconnected? Where did some of these ideas come from? Are they their ideas or are they society's ideas?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you gave by sharing your story, you gave some really practical things that you can do. One is, like you said, like what are some of the overarching stories that aren't your own that have like stopped you from connecting to your culture? Maybe it's colonialism, like which most of it, the reasons are colonialism. We're just going to put that out there.
Damn colonialism.
That's what, maybe like there's something in your ancestors, if you're able to trace that. So looking at like maybe why there's some reasons you want to keep hidden or feel disconnected. And then the other one, that you mentioned as well, is just like looking into the history of the culture, looking into, even if you're disconnected for whatever reason, looking into the history of the culture as well. One thing that came to mind also while you were talking is like in the beginning, you talked about, we're more than just the racial identities, also like tapping into our bodies and our five senses. So I would like list out the five senses and like brainstorm some ways that you can connect to like the cultures that you're wanting to connect to and the different ways. For me, the big thing is taste. And so like I'm really connected to my Chinese side in that way. Like I cook a lot of Chinese food here at home and everything, but I get homesick for American comfort food living over here as well. And so my partner makes fun of me for making meatloaf. He's like, it's just a giant meatball. Is this like what Americans eat? I was like, it's so good.
It's so good. It's mashed potatoes.
Exactly. So for me, it's like connecting through food, even though like, yeah, I feel disconnected from the States. I've been gone for now 6 or 7 years. And so sometimes I feel, for better or worse, disconnected from them, but it's still like part of my culture, part of who I am. And so like I connect through food. That's like how I embrace that part of me when it feels hard or when I feel homesick, I guess.
I love the tips that you and the reflections that you offered. And so for those of us that do feel disconnected from our identities, it's like to really get curious. So like, where is the disconnect? Why is there shame regarding some of the connection to those identities, and kind of looking at that underbelly of it, right? That wholeness of it, being friends with all of it. And then how can you create some connection through your senses, through food, through music, through like just learning about those cultures and just what that means. So we don't have a straight answer for you, but
No.
I'm sure that there's a lot of us that are disconnected. And let me tell you, I wish I had these tools. Like I'm saying, like, just because of all of like the social justice eruptions that went on, the much needed social justice eruptions that have started since 2020. I wish I had those tools sooner. I would have connected to my own inner ancestry sooner. And I really see how connecting to my roots has given me a deeper foundation that allows me to rise in my work and in my own leadership.
Yeah, I love that. And I also say like, yeah, dig into your roots, find, the places that you want to explore that are interesting to you and make you light up and everything. And if you get stuck, it's okay to take a step back and look at another part of your identity. I think sometimes when I'm working with clients, I'm like, well, what about this other thing that you're like really creative and you like to, paint or whatever it might be, or draw or things like that, like sometimes we get so hyper focused on anything, whatever, whether it's our racial identity, whatever it might be. And it's like, okay, but like, let's take a meta view of what's actually happening, because there's so much more to your life. There's so many other things that are happening as well. And so I think sometimes because people have focused so much on our identity for us, even when we didn't want to focus on it, I think we tend to also, get stuck in that habit or that mind swirl, because it's easy to do because people have done it for us and we had to second guess and question ourselves a lot, like just, being present in our physical form. And, it's okay not to have to think about it. It's okay to think about something else, other work or whatever that might be for you.
Now, you have such an amazing approach to discovering one sense of inner leadership. Could you tell us more? Like, don't you use like a lot of creativity and art and those fun processes that you have your Leo and your descendant, meaning you're working also with creatives.
Yeah. So I don't, it's funny because I don't necessarily, advertise or market to creatives, but I feel like I tend to attract people who are wanting to put their art into the world or whatever it might be. And yeah, I like to, sometimes if we're like stuck in something where I'm not getting any ideas or whatever, it's like, okay, let's get it out a piece of paper and we'll do like a little triangle drawing and like, draw out how we're feeling right now. Like little art, that's just like a simple art activity that we think of. I like to do a game called Perspectives, where we take different objects and your favorite foods and whatever, and try to create new perspectives of like somewhere where you're stuck. Where you're like, I'm never going to leave this job or whatever, or because XYZ. It's like, okay, well, let's see like what other different things, because there's always a multitude of perspectives to look at and see. So I love, playing games like that with clients, visualizations. I'm starting to get more and more into embodiment. And again, like thinking about the five senses and using those when I'm stuck with the client. You're thinking like,
Yeah.
okay, like what would, if this situation were a big banquet, what would that look like? Who would be there? What would the atmosphere be like? And let's paint that picture. So like trying to get people, out of the swirl of thoughts, because I think we get clients that are similar to us. I am like a tornado of
Yeah.
thoughts and swirling in my own head sometimes. And so I know how important it is to get someone that can be like, okay, let's look at it from a new window or door or peephole, whatever it might be. Let's just try to get something.
Yeah, well, with your unique, your astro brand, you have your Scorpio sun, which means just like at the heart of what you do is just like revealing what needs to come through, like doing that deep investigative work, using your intuition and revealing all the shadows that we need to kind of lift up and recognize. And then all of your Aquarius rising and your Aquarius moon, like that need to be an innovator and to do things differently, but then also like you're this just great emotional leader. Like it's just like it's so interconnected that I can see how when you said like it's this tornado of information, it's like your whole sensory ideas, like your emotional sense and your intellectual sense are just like so intertwined even with your physical sense, because you have that Mars there. But then when I look at you have Chiron also in Gemini, and you've overcome and accommodated so many ways that you were not understood or always like having your words taken out in unexpected ways. You're like, wait, I didn't
Yeah.
say that. And so you have this unique perspective on how to help others find their understanding and be like understood and being heard in the way that they want to be heard.
Yeah. And I think that Chiron, after you explained it to me, I feel like since that point, it's been like a whole journey of letting go of some like control I had or want of control I had over my messaging and how I showed up in my own leadership, in my own presence, because I was getting so frustrated that people weren't understanding exactly what I wanted them to hear, what I was trying to communicate. And I think like since I've let go of that, there's just like this freedom there of I'm just expressing myself.
Yeah.
And if you get it, you get it. If not, then the next person, it'll click with them. And I don't know, there's just some release, some definitely a stress release has like lifted from, showing up social media or emails or even at networking events and feeling like, oh, I have to like give them the perfect elevator speech so that they like me or that they'll want to, I don't
Work
know,
with you or
work with me,
yeah.
whatever it might be. So I belong, right? So it goes
Right.
back to the belonging then again. But yeah, there's just been, definitely a shift since we talked this past summer about around that for sure.
Yeah, so we actually had an Astro Brand reading, and that we met through some other people, but then you wanted to work with me for a few sessions, and I know you were sharing like some of the things with me earlier about how it's been like full circle that you've had a chance to integrate. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I know two or three people that did. First, I knew one person, and then another person in my circle got one from you, and then another person. I was like, okay. When the third person got, I was like, okay, this is a sign. I need to book an appointment with Leslie right now. And I think what was happening for me, there was a lot of things happening in my personal life that were unsure, in my business. So just wasn't going the way I wanted. And so I was like, I need the answer, which like a lot of times in business, people are like, branding is your answer, is the answer that you need. So I was like, okay, this could be the answer that I'm looking for. And I loved our session. I learned so much about myself, about how I work and what I could be doing, my potential more or less. And
Yeah.
I think what was necessary though, what I wrote to you and before this meeting was I needed time to integrate it all, because I feel like you gave me
Yeah.
this beautiful blueprint of like what's possible for me and what my strengths, my natural strengths, my natural, and not weaknesses, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, just all the parts.
Weaknesses. Yeah, all the parts. Exactly. And yeah, you just laid it out all there. And it's funny because like now in my messaging, I've come full circle. Like I'm using some of the phrase. I just listened to our recording before we met today, and I'm using some of the phrases and uh, the wording and kind of ideal client kind of messaging that we talked about. I'm using it now because I needed to like really fully embrace that for myself, which is, helping leaders get recognized as an authority in their work so they can get more opportunities. And I had to recognize that, like, I have now been seen as a leader and authority in my work, and I've gotten opportunities from that. And wow, I can help people do the same. And like, I just need to accept and feel that fully for myself before I could actually start telling people that's what I could do for them as well.
I love this idea of integration time, right? Because like I feel
Mhm.
like society has like created this myth that once you're told something and it's like a snap of a finger, all of a sudden it is. And most of the time it takes just another extra kind of journey, another extra kind of like I gotta wait for things and just kind of letting things like really settle in to get to that place of reception. And I think you went through that kind of ups and downs of that journey, really like looking at our quote unquote weaknesses, which just simply show us where we need to give ourselves more TLC and address
Yeah.
our needs a little bit better. Like weaknesses are not
Ex-
weaknesses, right? It's just like,
yeah.
oh, I just need a little bit more love here. Like,
Exactly. I feel like it's funny because the thing that I want the most was also the thing that I was most scared of, which is to be seen and heard more fully, more authentically, right?
mm,
And I feel like part of my journey from when we met to now has been like healing those, like, think
yeah,
of a better word, but weaknesses, or
love it,
those
loving
broken,
those.
yeah, loving
Pieces.
on those weaknesses, those parts of me that were keeping me hidden or keeping me
Yeah.
wanting to stay invisible for whatever reason, like learning how to, yeah, heal those and be with those parts of myself and be
Yeah.
like, hey, I want to take all of me out here and be a leader in this field. And so I need all parts of me to be on board with that. And so like, what is it going to take? What kind of loving and healing do I need for those parts of me to make that happen? And so yeah, I think I needed that time to do that, because again, like you said, it's like society's like, okay, yeah, you have like one whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Here's a
One
pill, here's
expertise. Yeah.
a
One
here's
identity.
a yeah, here's one identity that you can be at. But yeah, I think, like I said before, what I've like loosened my grip in my messaging is like, okay, like let's try this out. Let's see if people resonate with this. And if it works, it works. And if not, then like I get to try something new.
Yeah.
And that used to be the scary thing, but it's like, no, I get to try something new and see if that works. And if that will, attract anyone too.
Yeah, there's this like natural evolution. And I mean, you've been doing
Mhm.
so much powerful work. Like you work with corporations, you work with individuals. Can you tell us more about what you're doing in the world right now?
Yeah. So right now, my main work is working one-on-one with clients, which is what I love right now. I
Yeah.
love the intimacy. I love that we get to go on a journey together for an extended period of time. We get to see like the growth and accountability there. And so, I love working with multicultural leaders who, yeah, want to be seen for their authority and be recognized in their field, whatever that might be. And so I work with, um, change leaders in organizations to people who are wanting to start a business that, they need help getting visible and known for what they do.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
that Leo archetype, that like heart centered. They want to be so confident. They want to shine in their brilliance. And sometimes that's a little bit hard, especially as they're going cross those borders.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said before, it's like that swirl of thoughts that I think I get a lot of custom clients like that who
Yeah.
are swirling in their thoughts, and especially creatives, like they have so many ideas and then also doubts of like, can this actually happen? Can this actually work for me? Can I actually make money from doing what I'm passionate about? And yeah, I think I love that. It's like I love seeing the big picture for you and be like, yes, you can make
You
this work
can.
if you're ready to like dive in and you're getting the support you need. Let's make it happen. So yeah, I really love that as well.
Ooh, exciting. Well, tell us what you have something coming right up. Tell us all about
Yes.
it. Who it's for? What are you gonna do?
Yes. So I have a workshop coming up, which I'm going to give the link for the show notes. So it's on February 17th, but the link that I give to you will also get you to the replay if you're listening to this later. But the workshop is called How to Align Your Leadership with Your Multicultural Identity. And it's going from invisible and tokenized to being seen as a leader in your work. And so it's going to be some of the stuff we talked about today, but a little bit deeper dive into, how do you honor your identities and your ambitious goals without compromising your values, and how to get recognition that you want, but also that you need to get your next foot in the door to the next leadership opportunity, whatever that might be. So we'll be diving a little bit deeper into those as well. And so, that's my next workshop. And again, if you missed that, the replay will be the same link. Or I also have a one-on-one free call to get to know each other, and it's called the Leadership Roadmap. And what I like to do on that call is get to know where you're at right now. What are the struggles? What's holding you back? And then we build out a leadership roadmap together, a personalized one, right there on the call. And, if we decide at the end of the call to work together and it's a fit, then great. But if not, you can take my information and ideas and run with it on your own as well. So the link for that, I think, will also be in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll have all of the notes all of these links in the show notes at thesavvyluminary.com. But if you go to Klarissa's Instagram, she'll have everything in her bio link, and you can find her on Instagram at Klarrissa Frank, KlarrissaFrank, all one word.
Yes, perfect. Yes. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Oh my goodness. Klarrissa, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance, your expertise. And I just love how we are both have this kind of shared mission, so that everybody can feel their sense of inner intrinsic belonging so that they can show up as the luminary leader they are born to be.
I love it so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Leslie. It's been, such a heartwarming conversation is what I want to end
Aquarius with. To Aquarius.
Yes, exactly. All right. Thanks, you.
Klarrissa.
Bye.
If you love this podcast, please consider doing me a favor and heading over to Apple iTunes and leaving me a rating and review. Your rating and review helps this humble podcast get seen and found by more listeners like you. Please share the love.